To say that the past 12 months have been a roller coaster for Sean Strickland would be a huge understatement. It's fair to say Strickland has caused a lot of controversy in 2023. During the past 12 months, he tackled a home intruder, said women shouldn't vote, became UFC champion, and inadvertently inspired many men with his openness regarding his struggles with trauma. The life of a fighter is far from mundane, particularly in the case of Sean Strickland. After back-to-back defeats against Alex Pereira and Jared Cannonier, Strickland had slipped from 4 to 7 in the middleweight rankings and wasn't even close to being in the UFC title picture as we entered 2023. Unbeknown to him, it was all about to change. Strickland began 2023 with a fight against Nassourdine Imavov on January 14th at the UFC Apex. Strickland pressed forward and landed some good shots in the opening round. The momentum continued into the second before Imavov began to find his rhythm. Strickland began to assert his dominance during the back end of the fight and won a unanimous decision. Back in the win column, Strickland's next fight came 6 months later against Abus Magomedov. Although Magomedov started strongly, he began to look fatigued by the beginning of the second round. Strickland capitalized on this and took control of the fight, landing with ease and rocking Magomedov multiple times. After being dropped, the referee, Mark Smith, put an end to the fight. Despite going into the fight as a big favorite, the performance was a statement from Strickland, and the momentum had swung back in his favor. Meanwhile, the UFC middleweight title was now back in the hands of Israel Adesanya after he got revenge against Alex Pereira. The champion was scheduled to fight Dricus du Plessis in Sydney, Australia at UFC 293, but an injury to du Plessis forced him out of the fight, and the champion required a new dance partner. Adesanya had already beaten the other contenders, some of them twice, and with the risk of the middleweight division becoming stale, the UFC opted for some fresh blood. Strickland was named as the replacement for the main event at UFC 293 and went into the fight against Adesanya as the huge -650 underdog. Strickland's relentless pressure threw off Adesanya, and the champion was unable to gain any momentum early on. Adesanya was rocked in round 1 from a flurry of strikes, but Strickland was unable to find a stoppage. Apart from an improvement in round 2 from the champion, the remainder of the fight was predominantly one-way traffic. Strickland, to the surprise of those watching around the world, coasted to victory against a formidable Israel Adesanya, winning 4 rounds to 1 on all 3 scorecards. Shortly after his title win, Strickland was in the news for apprehending a gentleman he perceived to be a home intruder. The man was perched between 2 of Strickland's cars, and he went outside to confront the man and nullify the threat before the police arrived at the scene. As custom with new UFC champions, media obligations increased for Strickland post-fight as he appeared on numerous podcasts and MMA shows. The new champion gave fans an insight into his personality like never before, and unsurprisingly, controversial comments followed. One interview stood out in particular, a podcast episode with comedian Theo Von where Strickland opened up about his childhood trauma. It was unusual to see Strickland being so forthcoming and vulnerable, and the emotional interview reminded us all that things are not always as they seem on the surface. Following a couple of months of raising his profile even further through the media, Strickland was in attendance at UFC 296, Edwards vs. Covington. Dana White seated the champion close to the man he would be making his first title defense against, Dricus du Plessis, a decision that would come back to haunt the UFC president. After some goading from du Plessis, Strickland jumped into the crowd and lunged at his rival, and a brawl followed. The pair are scheduled to face each other at UFC 297 in Toronto. It's been a whirlwind year for Sean Strickland, and it doesn't seem likely to slow down anytime soon.